Something's happening in Jerusalem. And every time Jerusalem is at the center of the news, we as Christians should at least pause, stop, and ask ourselves, what and why are all eyes on Jerusalem? And so there's a lot happening, and I want to break it down for you before everybody starts freaking out and saying, oh, this is part of end times prophecy, Jesus is coming back tomorrow, and all these things. We need to stop, put it in proper perspective, not get overly excited, but be wise. But be wise to what's going on and see these as pieces of a larger puzzle that God is weaving, putting together for us as believers to help us to be mindful of what's happening in our current age so that we can be vigilant in sharing the gospel with others, sharing with our family, our friends, and being watchful of what's happening in the world so that we can be the voice of truth and freedom for what God is doing. And so something's happening in Jerusalem, and I want to share with you two specific events. I'm going to show those to you, and then you can do more research on your own, and I'm going to show you some scripture related to those things. So first of all, you probably heard about officials, and I'll show it to you, that were meeting together in Jordan. So this Jordanian delegation that got together are Arab and Muslim nations concerning Jerusalem holy sites. Now, that should not surprise most people, because of what's going on with Muslim and the Temple Mount and everything else. But why that's significant is because of this next thing. And this is this Noahide Conference event that's happening, Congress, I keep calling it conference, but Noahide Congress that's going to be happening in November, and that is going to be a little more significant, and I think that's why that and some other events that are happening in Jerusalem that we won't talk about this morning, but we'll talk about in another session. This calling for Messiah, this calling for this return to Jerusalem, and this drawing back to Jerusalem. And a lot of people are looking at this and wondering what's going on, why again Jerusalem in the news. And Jerusalem, though, is going to remain part of biblical history until the very end, until Jesus returns. And so it's important that anytime things are going on in Jerusalem, we begin to ask ourselves what is going on and why it's happening. So first of all, I want to go back to Scripture. I want to share with you something that Jesus said as it relates to the question of the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. And he warns his disciples. He says this in Luke 21. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, recognize that her desolation is near. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains, because these are the days of punishment, so that all things which have been written will be fulfilled. And that's key. Everything that's been written all throughout biblical history and throughout Scripture, specifically about Jesus, Messiah, second coming, all those things are coming to fulfillment. Jesus himself was fulfillment of prophecy, and if you study Scripture, you see that all of the patterns of the past that have been discussed are repeating themselves. And so while Jesus' warning was immediately about the judgment was going to take place upon Jerusalem, fulfilled historically in Rome through the Roman desolation and destruction of the temple in AD 70, we also must be wise that there's something that's extending beyond that. And Jesus, again, Luke 21, they will fall by the edge of the sword and will be led captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles. And here it is, until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. That's important. This Greek word times is about an appointed period of the nations. So this refers to a significant period, not just about a clock time, but there's a time and a season, and that's part of what biblical fulfillment of prophecy is about, that God is bringing about times of his return. And so two specific developments that I mentioned a moment ago. One, the political development of this Jordanian group that's coming together saying, hey, we're already here. What's going on with all the stuff and discussing what's happening outside of Jerusalem and the holy sites, making sure that their agenda is protected. And you have this, then the second group of people, this Noahide Congress that's scheduled to meet in November, and their discussion and what's going to happen is they're going to create this charter. So a founding charter, a unified syllabus, regional councils, a religious court discussion, financial foundation, structured international movement. It's a big thing. And they're pulling in the Israeli government, the president's residence into this. Now there's, no shared joining or anything like that, but you have to understand about this movement. And as you look into it a little bit more carefully, these 7 ideals that they're coming up with are, one, not Jewish. They're based on something I'll share with you in just a minute from Genesis, but also tradition, Jewish tradition. And so a couple of them, when you look more closely, are definitely anti-Christian and can be anti-Jesus and anti-Christ. So we have to be very careful about that. Genesis chapter 9 gives us the record of Noah. And I always think it's funny because Jesus even said in the days of Noah. So it says, then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him. It says, understand that I am confirming my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you. So there is a covenant that God made with Noah, his descendants, and all living creatures. But it doesn't present any type of laws or codified international religious institution that needs to come out of this. So it's a little interesting. And what you'll find, and you saw the verse that I shared, they quote Zechariah 2:11, many nations will join themselves to the Lord in that day and will become my people. And that is their verse, this Noahide Congress, and their website then declares this is that day. So that's their interpretation, that this is a movement. The text states that many nations will eventually join themselves to the Lord, but we have to be very careful that we don't read into it too much that it's fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy. But we also need to be wise about what's happening with this, because Zechariah later describes a future international crisis involving Jerusalem. Behold, I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes reeling to all the nations around it. And I will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the people. Why is that important now? Because there's already opposing opinions about Jerusalem. Whose territory is it? It belongs to this group. They already have a religious establishment there. Then there's another group who wants to establish some stuff. Now there's another group who wants to institute another religious temple on the place. So Zechariah describes nations gathering against Jerusalem, and there's going to be divine intervention. So there's always something. And when there's something going on with Jerusalem that's revolving around so much, it's important for us to stop and see what's going on. And why that's important and why that's pointing to something, puzzle pieces, labor pains the Bible talks about, I believe, is this. Because Revelation 13 describes globally enforced worship connected to the beast. Revelation 17 portrays corrupt religious power joined to political authority. Now, I'm not saying that this Congress is doing that, but some of the things that they're going after to do, again, non-Jewish, non-Christian, is very concerning. There's a worldwide coercive authority. You'll see in the end. There's required worship of the beast. There's a mark described in with deception, and there's a religious system. And so what I want to say is that this Noahide Congress, this isn't the one world religion that we've all been worried about, but I want you to say how interestingly this is that they're coming to Jerusalem, the center of all of the end times prophecy, and they're establishing something that looks like a one world system that will eventually become a reality with governing courts, financial systems, and everything else. So it's always important. So we have to be careful about not just what people say, but what they're trying to do. So if you like this type of content, I would encourage you to like and subscribe. We don't do sensationalism. I just share with you the truth from Scripture, to be watchful, to be mindful. And why is this important? That you share it with your friends, your neighbors, your family members, to talk to them about Jesus Christ, because in the end there will be a great deception. And so much of this is going to look so beautiful. It's going to look so fancy. Why? Because in the beginning the fruit was fancy and was beautiful and it looked good, and it was easily something that led Eve astray, and this new deception is not unlike the old, and it will lead people astray. So like and comment. I love to read your comments, what you have to say, what your thoughts are about this. If you've studied it, I'd love to hear what you have come to the conclusions about. Until the next time, God bless you, and we'll see you then.